Well, Natasha, thank you so much for helping with my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself and the things that you do?
Sure. Um, my name is Natasha Reid. I am, currently live in New York City, and I am a founder of a digital network service that provides entertainment for the Caribbean community. And my family is from Trinidad and Tobago, so this really is a labor of love that I do. It's not work for me. That it actually is just me putting my stake in the ground of history.
That is awesome. What got you started, and I mean, what inspired you to sort of develop that service for that community?
My family actually. My father is, like I said, my family's from Trinidad and Tobago. My father used to play steel pan, um, and gave that up to come to the U.S. I had aunts. I had an aunt who also used to play steel pan. One of the first female players to play at Carnegie Hall, on that instrument. Um, she also wound up playing what we call mass for carnival, where you dress up in elaborate costumes as an expression of whatever art form you want to express in that time period. She was very big in that. I have an uncle, two uncles actually, who started um, the carnival in Miami that happens annually in October. So, another uncle who used to be a judge and in Trinidad for steel pan. So it's just in my family. And I recognize that as someone who's a first generation American, there was a missing for those of us who basically call the US our home. And there's stories that get missed in that. We're we're now the next generation of gatekeepers. And there's a place that we have, there's an experience that we have that someone who lives in the Caribbean may not necessarily have, but we have the same passion and the same love for culture.
That is awesome. And it's so wonderful that you're like, putting a spotlight on that, preserving it, helping to spread it. I mean, always, I mean, I guess all of the Caribbean music that I have heard always sounds upbeat and joyful and
Mhm.
inspiring.
Oh, very much so. From calypso to kaiso to soca, there's I find a particular thread of storytelling that happens in the genre, and each one of those genres are different, but and each one was given birth by the one that came before it. Calypso actually was invented in Trinidad. So later on, as music changed around the world, of course, that influenced, other artists as well. So that influenced another version of calypso, which was known as kaiso. So it's like a little more upbeat, a little faster, and of course that happened with time. And then after kaiso became soca, which is a blend of African rhythms and Indian rhythms, Spanish and Latino music. Is like it's a total blend of various sounds that were happening in the region at the time to come up with something that is so profoundly upbeat that I have never heard anyone turn any soca music on and stay upset. It's like literally totally impossible. If I had to go back to school to um, become a scientist to discover, okay, what's the source of happiness? Soca would be the place I start. It's like, okay, we're gonna figure out what is it about this music that literally puts joy in your soul that you can't stay happy.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to find a track for me to listen to for
Oh,
times that I need that little extra push.
yep. Trust me, you can't go wrong. Marsha Montano, Patrice Roberts, Destra Garcia, Bungie Garland, Fan Lines. Like those are just a few, but trust me, you just start off with that, you will wind up finding your own artists along the way because there are many up and coming artists that just have basically found their own place inside of the genre, and the genre itself is changing. And as again, as another generation comes through, there is a now a shift in the art form as well. So I'm looking forward to see like what this generation is going to put out next.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, Gab. I mean, like technology has got to play a role in this whole process in some way, because I got to imagine you have all these different groups of people coming to these islands, um, and essentially there's really, they need to interact with each other, and they end up sharing their music and kind of blending it together. But now with technology, people can show up in an island and still be in their own little world, not having to interact at the same level. But then on the other hand, now the entire world is an island, and you could kind of blend and interact with people all around the world, even if you're not physically together. So I'm kind of curious, and whenever you look at how uh, technology has changed over the past, 20, 30, 40 years, and its effect on sort of like the development of these musical genres. Um, I mean, do you see it as being, I guess, better or worse than it was before we had?
Um, I'm gonna say different, not better or worse, different, because any technology is going to change how a particular group, any technology, new technology that's introduced to any new group is going to change what happens in that group, right? So, um, for example, I like to give examples. If anyone has ever watched Star Trek, right? Yes, I'm a Trekkie. But if anyone's ever watched Star Trek, one of the main things that happens in Star Trek is not really spoken about, but it's really interesting. They have this thing called the Prime Directive, right? No matter where that crew goes to explore, they are guided by this one thing. Do not put something inside of the society that's going to shift it so much that the society doesn't have an opportunity to catch up with, right? So that's the prime directive. Like you can't go and drop in, lasers if they're still lighting fire with matches, right? You can't go in and like you can't do something that's going to shift the community so much that they don't have a time to catch up. Well, that is literally something that happens in our society all the time. Social media is one of those things that, it kind of happened in many areas where at first people were like, well, what is this thing? They couldn't understand it. They couldn't really figure it out until it became, wait a minute. Well, I can use this to reach someone, you mean in another part of the world without actually picking up my phone per se, right? So I'm eliminating the phone company in a particular kind of way, right? So now, well, if I can reach you in another part of the world, what would be the point of reaching you in another part of the world? Oh, because you're not someone I know. It's not like I'm reaching out to my grandmother or my cousin directly. This is just me being on this thing called a platform that now I'm talking, virtual talking, right, about something. So, what am I actually trying to say? So, you now have people talking about, okay, well, this is how I feel today. This is how I feel in this moment. This is how I felt like literally 1 second ago. This is how I feel in the next second. So it now shortened the time in terms of communication, but it also opened up a platform for people to now reach communities that they never thought they would reach. So you have 8 billion people on the planet, means you have an opportunity to tap into that almost 8 billion people on the planet if they have access. It's something that people could not fathom 20 years ago. It wasn't it just like internet, that was like, I'm just trying to find something for me. Now I'm trying to give something to everyone in the world. So what am I actually trying to give? And I say that in the vein of, for the Caribbean, it's really a great opportunity for people to get to know and understand the place you go to visit on vacation has a group of people who live there all the time.
Mm,
And the thing that you enjoy is actually their life that they're doing that has you enjoy it, right? It's not something that shows up just because you landed on the plane. This is how it is when you're not thinking about it, when you're sitting in your own home, enjoying your own, family, your own friends, your own culture. This culture actually exists all the time. So what you may come for your own enjoyment. We're happy to share. But do note that when you leave, we're still doing that because this is our lifestyle. So social media actually gives people glimpses into what we cook, why we cook the things that we cook, why we call, give it's amazing. You give everyone a nickname. But, well, what's the point of giving everyone a nickname? Well, that person did something. So it reminded me of X. And, it becomes a natural thing to just give someone a nickname. Why do you treat your neighbor in a particular way? Because that's, part of the things that we do. So you get to learn in um, a traditional but non-traditional way. It's like a cultural exchange that happens every time someone jumps on social media. And, you know, it can work both ways. It can have a positive effect and it can have a negative effect. I look at it like this: if we can keep the positive going, right? And there, and no matter what, you're going to have dark channels. But if you can keep the positive going, and when you see the dark channel, it's like, okay, let me stay out of that area and come back into that positivity. I think what will wind up happening is that shift would now have an influence on what people now come to see in the Caribbean, but what people in the Caribbean now come to share. And there
mm.
will be, like, something else happening inside of, that cultural and artistic art form. Something else will shift because there's an influence now that doesn't require an airplane. There's an influence now that doesn't require you to be on a cruise ship, or doesn't require me going to someplace else. I can just be in my home, and I can be influenced by someone who is thousands, hundreds, 5, 10 miles away from me, simply because I got on this thing called a social media platform and I said hi.
It's interesting, so much of our music is associated with a place, geography, and kind of like the way you describe it, sounds like at some point there will no longer be that association between places and types of music. It'd be a little bit more ambiguous, I guess.
Oh yeah, I really think so. I think that there will always be the history of something. Where did it originate? They'll always have that. But as we start to open our digital borders, that is gonna there's gonna be a lot of things that wind up no longer belonging just to a place. It's going to be inside of this whole other world that, doesn't have a border in the same, other than, what app are you going through to access it? Like, that would be the border. If that is someplace where you're sharing pictures and videos, someplace where you're telling stories, someplace where you're doing a combination of both, that's going to be the border that's actually set up. If you're doing it in short bursts for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or if you're doing it in a long form. right? Somewhere where somebody has the patience to sit down for 30 minutes and really stay engaged with you. That's going to be the new border, right? So even that, I think it will also heighten the desire for someone to say, you know what, at some point I do want to go and see the physical place, because we've exchanged so much. And for some people, it might not. But I think the terms that we're accustomed to, the borders that we're accustomed to, will actually start to kind of fade away. Um, yeah, they'll kind of fade away. There'll be, excuse me, there will be that political border, yes, but that experience of not being able to know something because I haven't been there, I think that would slowly start to diminish because people can access it, you know, from the palm of their hand with their smartphone.
It's definitely going to be an interesting world. I mean, it always is. It keeps evolving and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Very much so.
well, I wanted to ask you a few questions about space. Being a Trekkie, I'd be interested in how that influences your thoughts. I guess first of all, did you know that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
No, and it's about time, right? But I can understand. So I'm gonna vary off on a little bit. It's like I say it's about time because um there was first that initial race to get there because there was a competition of who will be there first. I think right now we are really in the age of exploration where it's no longer about who will get there first. It's more about, well, what's the purpose of us doing it? How beneficial is it not just for the the country or the people that are going, but how beneficial is it for us to know and learn that information, right? Because I'm very much a believer that there's no way. I just find it numerically improbable that this blue planet that we're on is the only one like it that exists. I just think we haven't found the super highway to connect to that other location where there could be others that look just like us or maybe a little different. I don't know. I'm open to
And
it.
and whenever you think about us going to the moon, yeah, you're talking about it needs a benefit. I mean, what do you see as the benefits? I get asked that a lot, and I have a set of questions, but I haven't really found like the one that really connects really well.
Mhm. Um, One, I think the biggest benefit is for us to really get profoundly understand how small we are and how much more we can do. I think we fight human beings, we're super great, and yet we're really petty at the same time. And two things can't exist at the same time. Like we don't want to believe it, but yes, two things can't exist at the same time. And I think we fight too much for ownership of the earth without recognizing we have entire galaxies that we can be a part of and learn from. And we only fight for that here because we haven't really built the resources to go out and explore. If we just look at just go back a century, right? Like literally go back a century, go back 2 centuries. What happened? We discovered traveling from one side of the globe to the next via ship, one side of the globe to the next via airplane. And we kind of stopped. It's like, okay, we went to the moon and then we stopped. I was like, okay, they did that, we did it. Now what? Let's just focus on, building faster airplanes that get us from one side of the planet to the next. Let's focus on faster ships. Let's focus like we just stopped here. And I think what happened I don't know this to be true, but this is my theory. I think what happened when we were in that initial space race, we got scared. We did it, but we got scared that the technology that we actually were able to create the technology to go to that thing that we just sit in our own little plot and look up and we're like, oh yeah, that's the thing we call the moon, right? And we realize, wait a minute, we can actually reach out and touch that. And if we can actually reach out and touch that, does that mean that there are other things like that we can reach out and touch? And the vastness of what we may consider infinity became too great for us to really consider the plausibility of us traveling to other places that are light years away. So saying that, we're now going back to explore that, I really think it's a great opportunity for us to look at, yeah, we may be small, but we can actually take that big leap. We can actually look beyond this place and think and imagine what could it be like to be over there and live over there. What would it actually take for us to create a place that we're traveling to and from? Just like we go from New York to New Jersey, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to the moon. Really? Yeah, well, can you pick me up so and so? Yep, no problem. Like there's a possibility of it being just like that. But it really would take something from us to even imagine beyond the fact that it's impossible for it to be like that.
That I think that's definitely, I mean, just expanding like our perspective, kind of our expectations, kind of realizing that we are just a little bitty, you know, speck in like a gigantic universe. I mean,
Mhm.
if we could get more of that, I think you're right. That would be worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Just, it really does take that childlike wonder for someone to say, I'm going to go work for an organization that is exploring an area that I may never touch. That it takes a lot, to say I'm going to work for an organization like NASA, because everyone who's providing something is not going to be the recipient of the end result. Yet they know that what they're providing is beyond valuable to make that one flight happen. So it's like that astronaut goes, but it's that astronaut is carrying literally hundreds of people that put in the work to make them get there. So I think people who work for NASA are super great. You know, you don't get a lot of praise, but I think it's super great.
That's awesome. Um, Whenever you think about how far we might get in the next 200 years, what do you think?
um, I think once the fear factor, really does disappear, space exploration would be similar to the cell phone. Right. It would just happen so fast that people will once forget that we never did that. There's a time now, right now, people don't really remember a time when this thing called a cell phone was huge. Like you had to walk around with a big backpack, basically. That before the before the big pack, it was only something that you saw in movies and you didn't know that if it was real or not. You know, Now the cell phone is so commonplace that people change it like they change anything else. And it's the speed of it, the use of it, it has become so commonplace that people are not accustomed to not reaching you when they try to call you. I think in the next 200 years, the thought of space travel will be similar to that. Like the cost point of going from, one planet to the next would change, right? The access for the average person will also change, and that would change how we are about how we are stewards of the original planet that we're on, right? And I think that the technology is there for us and for those next 5, 10 generations to start exploring and building faster. I think the only thing holding us back is, um, you know, it's just the fear of it. What are we going to find? You know, what does that mean about us? What does it mean about what's really out there? Like, we have a lot of unanswered questions that will get answered. And in the next 200 years, there are going to be two people who are just like you and I. We're going to have a similar kind of conversation. Was asking about the next 200 years, and their conversation, if I could just come back and be the fly in that conversation, it's going to be totally different, because they may no longer be talking about going to space. They may be talking about, I don't know, intergalactic travel. It could be, that they found 5 other societies, and we're discussing what those borders look like. It's no longer the border on the landmass. It's now borders in undefined space that we don't have a map for. Like, you can't, literally right now, you can't go to your phone and pull out a map of, oh, can you give me a map of the Milky Way? I mean, you can, but you can't really fathom that. Like,
Mhm.
we fathom a map of the US, a map of a global map of the Earth. We can see that, but we really can't fathom what a map of, the Milky Way looks like. We know they're constellations, yeah, but even that is kind of abstract. Like, oh yeah, little points, but in between those points, there's something in between those points that make up those constellations. We just can't see it yet, and we haven't really understood it yet. So in 200 years, those conversations would be, I can see those conversations being totally different. There are certain answers that would come up, and the technology would have moved so fast that I think it would really force an elevation of us as human beings, that it's time. It really is time for us to evolve past, these just these petty grievances.
Well, Natasha, if you could, would you take a trip to space?
Oh, I feel on the spot. Actually, I would. I would. I would. And I don't know what I would be looking for. It's I would just be going just to go. How I wind up in most places that I've never been. It's like, oh, there was a ticket and I went, and I discovered that I liked it, or I discovered that I didn't. But I actually discovered something. So yeah, I would take that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Natasha, it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. Thank you so much for participating in my project.
Nathan, thank you so much for extending the invitation. This is really, really fun. And I'm so happy that I actually got an opportunity to share my love of all things space, all things sci-fi, in a really productive conversation. So thank you.
And I have over 400 more days left in my project. It goes to the end of 2024. So if you know
Awesome.
of anybody else that would be willing to have a conversation, please send them my way.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there are a couple of people already in my mind that I'm like, oh yeah, gotta do this.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Okay, you too, Nathan.
Bye bye.
Bye.